Hi, my name is Tessa Nelson, and I'm just giving you a presentation on my experiential literature review and just the paper that I wrote. All right, so there are three key areas of focus called the grand challenges of social work, and they focus on an individual, family, and well-being, stronger social fabric, and a just society. And so for the purposes of my paper, I decided to pick developing a just society through building financial capability and assets for all. And for my research paper, I specifically had the question, does a monthly basic living wage or income reduce welfare dependence and increase personal assets? And in my paper, I go over systematic poverty, welfare, the welfare system that we have now, income inequality, and taxation. Um, and so a lot of people ask, like, why does poverty matter? Well, 37 million people in the US experience poverty every year, and it can occur in any demographic at any stage of life. And those who are in poverty are less likely to have access to needed resources in both physical and mental health. Current welfare programs, they lack the ability to encourage asset gains and financial independence. Once people in poverty are cut off from welfare due to financial and asset increases, for example, like an hourly wage increase or like an hour increase in their work hours, it can encourage financial collapse because the family might not be able to continually retain these benefits or other challenges promote them back into poverty. This can be like personal or large levels of emergency that can do this. These welfare standards perpetuate a constant reliance on the welfare system. So poverty has disproportionately affected people of different minority groups. So there was research conducted by Leclerc and Subadar that demonstrated areas heavily populated by minority groups have less opportunities socioeconomically than that of the US. And this causes spatial isolation for people of minority statuses. It leaves their neighborhoods selectively abandoned without prospects or opportunity. And this type of geographic deterioration leads to higher disease and mortality rates with an inability to increase their personal gains or financial self-determination. And so people who previously, also people who previously reported being on welfare or like the process of getting on welfare noted that they couldn't due to using up their lifetime limits, an increase in working hours, and an increase in their pay, even though they were still continuing to struggle with monthly finances. And so that's another one of the arguments that promotes that the systematic poverty exists, is it just doesn't really continually help people and kind of forces them to lower their hours and constantly lower their pay. And so when I switched more into my correlational studies, I learned about the benefits cliff, which is where people lose welfare as they attempt to become self-sufficient, like I addressed just a second ago. This implies that this keeps people in a state of constant systematic poverty because they cannot escape the transitional period from reliant to completely self-reliant. Economic emergencies like COVID-19 is a huge one, cause people in poverty to be even poorer because they don't have the ability to maintain assets. These emergencies caused low socioeconomic individuals to have less of an ability to recover from the pandemic. So in this way, COVID-19 encouraged economic inequality and income caps to grow. And so various governments attempted to stimulate their economies during the pandemics. Various experts also started thinking about, like, what does a universal or basic income look like to help fight poverty? And so under the concept of basic income, the federal government would gift each citizen a monthly income on top of what they earned regularly through the workforce. So like an example would be like if the government, like in COVID-19, everyone got $1,200, but this would be like more of a monthly thing for each family to just be given from the government continually. The Journal of World Psychiatry is very pro basic income. They conducted a meta-analysis and systematic review of basic income programs, and they discovered that basic income had a positive impact on subgroups in poverty, and they want to encourage mental health professionals to champion taxation reform and promote this delivery of basic income and to help reduce poverty. Basic income, there are some concerns with it that I found from my effectiveness studies, and that it could decrease the populations working in the workforce, which makes the taxing impossible for basic income because people wouldn't be working as much, and then the taxes that were generated from that revenue wouldn't exist anymore. And so that some others are worried that a basic income may create further income inequality by allowing higher income level earners to earn even more money while preventing those in poverty from having access to resources that will still be more available for middle and upper class individuals. And one of the main questions was, is it possible to economically support basic income? So, and the three studies that I investigated, so Gattack and Jaravel assessed taxation data through current trends. They compared them through different taxation models of merely a flat tax rate and taxing the richest members of society at a higher rate to pay for basic income. They realized that if tax models were drastically altered and a flat tax rate of 45% was introduced across the board, it would continue to encourage participation in the workforce, and basic income could be successfully implemented in larger societies. They also pointed out in their study that this tax rate would force the wealthiest individuals to pay their share of taxes to support society, which would lessen income inequality. But using a mixed methods approach, Hoynes and Rothstein, they used literature, labor supply literature, and basic income programs to discover that economic impacts of a basic income on poverty and society would be regressive for poverty and welfare. And so they do not believe that it would be helpful because they don't think that there's enough evidence to support that basic income would be helpful or what its impact would be on the economy. And that could potentially be regressive for society and even specifically welfare and poverty. So to foster funding for basic income, Riedel proposed that low-income earners remain untaxed up to the poverty line. He then encouraged a tax system that would increase taxes paid depending on yearly income. He focused heavily on creating a fair tax system for those who are the highest earners in the U.S. In his study, he particularly cited several sources on tax code. Riedel explained how the top 1% are often not taxed compared to the average citizen, and how this creates more challenges with economic income inequality and scarcity of resources. Dr. Riedel, however, was a huge supporter of basic income. He pointed out that it would reduce poverty and income inequality, that it would support the middle class and reinforce the desirable qualities of capitalism. He also argued that it would fight against capitalistic tendencies that are exploitative and harmful. And having extra money in the economy would encourage a free market spending for the middle class, and it would give those in poverty a cushion to protect them against macro, meso, and micro level emergencies. So he proposed that this would help alleviate the strains of poverty and encourage economic resources in low socioeconomic communities, and that it would encourage financial independence from welfare. So according to several effectiveness studies, an additional welfare resources are needed to assist individuals and families in escaping systematic poverty. And pretty much all of them agreed. All of the studies agreed with that. However, disagreements still arise based on whether basic income can effectively assist in that goal or if the policy will cause ongoing struggles with socioeconomic status. So basically, to answer my research question, does a monthly basic living wage or income reduce welfare dependence and increase personal assets? I would say that more expansive studies are needed to determine a definitive answer. And although Dr. Riedel's work demonstrated strong arguments in support of basic income, Hoynes and Rothstein's study appeared more all-encompassing in their topics. They definitely did more of an in-depth dive. They cited several effective programs that were similar to basic income, but pointed out that information on longitudinal and widespread basic incomes are difficult to assess while using randomized natural experiments. So they were able to find a couple of longer running policies, but there were just questions that could not be answered on a larger economic scale and what the influences of basic income would do in that level. But that's not to say that basic income is ineffective or that it won't assist in escaping poverty. Out of the studies read, basic income does show promise in reducing economic inequality, bolstering financial independence, and encouraging asset gains, as well as increasing access to needed resources that will assist in positive health outcomes. And so that just kind of sums up my paper. And so I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that it was informative to you on basic income. All right, and I almost forgot to mention that I have 2 pages of references. This page is specifically for my research references, which cite all the studies that I used to make this PowerPoint. And then I also cited all of the art references that I used in my video. Thank you so much.